For a long time, golf felt different from every other sport. It felt cleaner, slower, more honorable. A game built on quiet respect, personal responsibility, and trust. That's why what happened inside the PGA Tour hit so hard. Because this wasn't just another sports controversy. This was something deeper, something that made fans, players, and even lifelong golf purists stop and ask one uncomfortable question. What was really going on behind the scenes? At first, the headlines made it sound simple. A business move, a strategy shift, a way to save the future of professional golf. But the more details started slipping out, the stranger it became. Players who had stood loyal suddenly looked blindsided. Fans who had defended the tour felt confused. And the very people who had asked the golf world to take a moral stand were now standing in a completely different place. And the most shocking part, it wasn't just the deal itself. It was how it happened. If you truly love golf, if this game means something to you, and if you enjoy stories that go deeper than the scoreboard, subscribe and become part of this golf family. Because around here, we don't just watch golf. We feel it. We talk about it. And we care about what this game becomes. To understand why this scandal shook so many people, you have to go back to the golf civil war. For months, maybe even longer, the sport felt split right down the middle. On one side, you had the PGA Tour defending its identity, its legacy, and everything it claimed to stand for. On the other side, LIV Golf came in with huge money, huge headlines, and a completely different vision. And no matter where you stood, one thing felt clear. The fight was personal. Players were being asked, directly or indirectly, to choose what mattered most. Loyalty or leverage. Tradition or disruption. Legacy or cash. Some players left. Some stayed. Some took criticism. Others took praise. But the players who stayed with the PGA Tour were not just staying for a paycheck. A lot of them felt they were standing up for the soul of the sport. That's what made the next moment land like a punch to the chest. Because then came the announcement that changed everything. Not a rumor. Not a leak from social media. An actual shockwave. The PGA Tour, after publicly fighting this battle, was now stepping into a framework agreement with the same financial force behind LIV. Just like that, the lines that had been drawn so aggressively suddenly looked blurry. And for a lot of fans, it felt less like a strategy and more like betrayal. But here's the part nobody talks about enough. It wasn't only what happened. It was who didn't know it was happening. That's where this story stops being ordinary sports business and starts feeling like a real scandal. Because when reports came out, one detail kept hitting fans the same way over and over again. Secrecy. The people who had carried the message. The people who had defended the tour in public. The people who had answered questions, taken criticism, and stayed loyal through the chaos. Many of them did not see this coming. Think about that for a second. Imagine giving your public voice to a cause. Imagine defending it in interviews. Imagine turning down life-changing money because you believe your side stood for something bigger. And then imagine finding out that major negotiations have been happening behind closed doors anyway. That is not just awkward. That is emotional whiplash. And this is where everything changed. Because from that point on, the conversation was no longer just about LIV versus the PGA Tour. It became about trust. Real trust. The kind that holds a locker room together. The kind that makes players believe leadership means what it says. Fans felt it too. Golf fans are not stupid. They understand business. They know sports are driven by money. But golf has always sold something more than competition. It sells character. It sells self-control. It sells the idea that how you play matters just as much as what you shoot. So when the biggest story in the game starts to feel like a backroom negotiation dressed up as principle, people notice. And then another layer hit. Because the players who stayed suddenly found themselves in a brutal emotional position. Were they heroes for standing firm? Were they pawns in a larger power move? Were they simply told one story while leadership was already preparing another? Those are painful questions, especially in a sport where reputation follows you for years. Wait till you hear what happened next, because this is the hidden detail that made the whole scandal feel even more surreal. The language around the agreement started sounding less like golf and more like corporate chess. New structures, new entities, new commercial control, future pathways, possible returns. It all became very polished, very strategic, very legal. But to regular fans, and honestly to a lot of players, it felt cold. Almost too clean. Like the humanity of the story was being scrubbed away by boardroom language. And that matters. Because behind every polished statement was a very human reality. Careers have been judged. Friendships have been strained. Fans had argued for months. Players have been labeled disloyal, greedy, stubborn, or self-righteous, depending on which side they chose. Then suddenly, the sports power brokers were trying to move into a new phase, as if everyone could just reset. But golf doesn't reset that easily. This game remembers. It remembers who said what. It remembers who stood firm. It remembers who carried the pressure in public. And maybe that's why the backlash felt so intense. It wasn't only outrage. It was hurt, a quieter kind of anger. The kind that comes when people feel they were asked to believe in something that leadership itself was willing to rewrite. And yet, to be fair, this story is not as simple as making one side the villain and the other side the victim. That's important, because if you strip away the emotion for 1 second, you can see why the pressure was enormous. Professional golf was fractured. Lawsuits were expensive. Sponsors were watching. Fans were getting exhausted. The sport was losing clarity. In that kind of environment, leadership might convince itself that a dramatic deal is the only path forward. That survival requires compromise. That the future demands a move nobody will like in the moment. That may be true, but even if a move is strategic, the way you make it still matters. And that may be the real heart of this scandal. Not just whether the agreement could have made business sense. Not just whether golf needed a new path, but whether the people who carried the message of the PGA Tour deserved honesty before the world got a headline. That's the hidden detail that keeps this story alive. Not money alone. Not politics alone. Not even rivalry alone. Trust. Because once trust cracks in golf, the damage spreads quietly. It shows up in every commissioner statement, every player press conference, every fan debate, every conversation about loyalty, tradition, and what this sport is supposed to represent. And here's the part that still stings for a lot of golf fans. Some of the players who stood tallest during that divide ended up looking like they were forced to absorb the emotional cost of a decision they didn't make. They defended the shield. Then suddenly they had to explain why the shield had changed shape. That's brutal, especially in golf, where so much of greatness is tied to credibility. You can recover from a bad round. You can recover from a lost season. But recovering from broken trust, that takes much longer. And still, maybe there's something strangely revealing about all of this. Maybe scandals like this don't just expose weakness. Maybe they expose truth. They show us what the sport values when pressure gets real. They show us whether leadership protects principles or only uses them when convenient. And they force fans to decide what kind of game they want to keep supporting. Because we all say we love golf. But what exactly are we loving? The beauty of the swing? Of course. The tension on Sunday? Absolutely. The silence before impact? Always. But beyond that, I think many of us love golf because it feels like one of the last sports where integrity is still part of the product. That's why this scandal landed so differently. It didn't just challenge the business of golf. It challenged the image of golf itself. And maybe that's why people are still talking about it. Not because the story was loud, but because it was personal. For the players, it was personal. For the fans, it was personal. For the future of the PGA Tour, it was personal. And maybe the most shocking detail of all is that a scandal this big didn't need one wild moment, one explosive interview, or one piece of fake drama to shake the sport. It only needed silence, secrecy, and a sudden reversal powerful enough to make millions of people question what they had been asked to believe. That is why stories like this matter. Because they remind us that golf is not only built on trophies and prize money. It's built on trust. And when trust gets tested, the whole game feels different. So maybe the real question isn't whether this scandal shocked the golf world. Maybe the real question is this. Can the PGA Tour ever ask for that same level of loyalty again and expect fans and players to give it without hesitation? I want to hear your honest take. Did this scandal permanently change how you see professional golf? Or do you think the game can fully recover? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Stay with the channel. And if golf means something real to you, I'll see you in